Next month, August 23rd, Nikki and Charlie face off to see who will represent the Democratic Party in the upcoming governor face-off that will happen in November, where one of these two will take on Ron DeSantis. Now, I would say that although, as was said in the case of other individuals, such as Liz Cheney, around polls and so forth, many times you can't totally trust what you're seeing. Nonetheless, I think the fairly big lead that Crist enjoys in current polls, together with the fact that my sense is his past as a Republican may actually be an asset in this case in terms of the way the voters may be thinking about who they want to choose to take on DeSantis, and the fact that he has experience from the past as well. And then probably most importantly, I would point to the astrology, specifically the Jupiter transit, because although Nikki's chart is pretty good, she has a lot of fire in the chart, the Sagittarius planets up here, the Mars, the Eris, and so then the Jupiter cycle overall is quite friendly, except that you notice her degrees are all starting at 11.5, the lowest. And so Jupiter will not reach those degrees until next year. Whereas in the case of Crist, you see that he has early Leo planets, which the Jupiter has already found and will be in effect contacting when these two are facing off next month on the 23rd. Therefore, my sense is that he is likely to be the winner of the Democratic primary, and then he would take on DeSantis. And when it comes to comparing these two, and keep in mind, just as is the case for Nikki and Charlie, there are no birth times known, so all of this has to remain somewhat speculative. I'm looking at the day charts and trying to get the best possible sense of it. But you can see that both Crist and DeSantis have an Aquarius moon. It's actually remarkably close by degree in terms of the noon position, but we don't know what their time would be. So both have a range of 15 Aquarius to practically the end in case of DeSantis. In the case of Crist, it's 15 Aquarius to about 27 Aquarius. And so both of them have Saturn in that range, which makes sense in terms of the intensity of the situation, the pressure that Saturn puts on whenever a person is reaching for a big goal. But in terms of comparing, it's approximately the same, depending on where in the chart the respective moons would fall. But nevertheless, I'll consider that pretty equal. I also see that Neptune is another tie of sorts, because in DeSantis' case, Neptune is still within range of opposing his sun, which wouldn't necessarily be a good thing, nor is it good for Crist. Maybe a little bit better, Neptune conjoining Mars, but it becomes a problem because it also squares Venus. So I would not consider this Neptune an asset. But then if I compare the Jupiters, Jupiter in Aries for DeSantis isn't doing all that much. It is within the range of a trine to his Jupiter, around election time, because now we're looking at November. It's no longer a matter of August. Around that time, just prior to the vote, it'll be trining itself. But by election day, Jupiter is back in Pisces, where it'll spend a period of time at the end of the year, November, December. And if I'm simply looking at the Jupiter trine to itself, I would actually prefer Crist's Jupiter trining the Sun, in that it'll be doing this pretty much in the same way as DeSantis trining his Jupiter. It's just that it's the Sun getting trined. And also the fact that throughout the rest of the summer he enjoys this connection more because he has more planets there. But probably the key, let us call it restriction problem for DeSantis is the Pluto, because Pluto is in a direct square to his Mars when the voting happens near the end of the year. And so when you take that and you put it together with the fact that he's on a Uranus opposition as well, this is the year of the Uranus opposition, which, by the way, can be a really good thing because it can catapult you to a new level in your life. So there is that possibility that the Uranus could manifest in that way, and even potentially, to some extent, the Pluto square can do that as well, again, depending on where it is in the chart and so forth. But nevertheless, let's just say that since Crist does not have to deal with the Pluto energy in the same way, it does square Neptune in his chart, which I suppose could be a factor, again, depending on the position of the Neptune and the strength of the Pluto. You start getting into a lot of unknowns, but I consider a Pluto square Mars potentially more dangerous in terms of a loss. So when it comes to the polls, at the moment, DeSantis has a pretty good lead. It's not double digits, but he's leading comfortably against Crist. And yet, I would think that given these planetary positions, I would give Crist a really good chance. And my feeling is this race is going to come down to a tiny margin in the end, regardless of where the polls are right now, given the way Florida has been in the past and the relative strength of what I see here in these two charts.